All right. Well, good morning. We are live this morning and we are going to be talking about mobile marketing and we're going to be talking about social media. My name is Dr. Beth McCabe and I represent the School of Business and Management in the Department of Marketing and Management at National University. And I'm so pleased that you could join our webinar today. We are so thrilled to be able to talk to the Vice Chancellor of Marketing at National University. And we have a chat for you. If you'd like to put your question in there, we will be happy to hear from you. We will start out with a few items about National University's graduate programs, and then we will get into our interviews. I've got a few questions prepared for Seth, and then I will leave it up to the audience here who might want to ask some questions as well. And we have three main goals here today. We want to advance the interest in learning about mobile marketing and social media, and also talk about higher education and marketing, what kind of trends we may be seeing. And then we want maybe you to challenge yourself a little bit about how you might move ahead in your career, especially if you're interested in higher education. And hopefully you'll go away today with something new about marketing and specifically about mobile marketing and social media. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us here. This is a little flyer that we have about National University and some of the marketing programs that we have. This is an example of what our class actually looks like in marketing. And this was from last year's class. So you can see that students like yourselves are live and in person and learning about what they're doing on the job that day. They're challenging themselves, they're involved, they're interactive. Our program in mobile marketing has faculty that have real world experience, and you have a specialization in mobile marketing with 2 courses, social media 2 courses, and then a final course that makes you, forces you to create a plan that includes both mobile marketing and social media. So one of the, some of the things that you learn in social media are the platforms you see here. And just this past week, I attended the Social Media Marketing World Conference here in San Diego, and I attended seminars, workshops, keynotes on all of these items. Because we are based in San Diego, many students and faculty have been able to attend this. And this will be going on again next year. So if you're interested and want to find more about that, I'll be happy to lead you toward that. As far as our courses go, we give lots of interaction. And here's just a very small slice of what that interaction looks like. So we teach about the career opportunities in the mobile marketing field. You learn about each one of these careers, and then you have a matching exercise. So you actually get some experience in doing that. So hopefully that is a fun, quick introduction to what we're doing. I'm going to stop my share here, and then we're going to have an opportunity to hear from you, as well as for you to get to meet Seth O'Dell. So Seth is the Vice Chancellor of Marketing at National University. Many of you are familiar with the university. I see that Seth is coming in loud and clear here, and I want to make sure that everybody here has a chance to interact with him, and that's why this is live. So kind of anything can happen. We've been doing this for about a year now. We've interviewed some experts, some students, we've interviewed faculty and lots of other really interesting people about marketing, and especially about mobile marketing and social media. So before we get started with Seth, I wanted to give a little bit of a bio on Seth to kind of set the table here, because he really is an expert in the higher education field. I liked how the Chronicle of Higher Education called what he did with a cross-country bus tour campaign. They called it Exhibit A of marketing success, and one of the most buzzed about marketing campaigns in higher education. And for the last decade, he's been helping high-profile campuses, both on-campus and online programs, develop, and his marketing talents go into 24 institutions so far. He was also in 2014 named the International Brand Master by Education Marketing Group. And now Seth is in San Diego as Vice Chancellor, Marketing for National University. A couple of things you might not know about him, but I did discover this on his Twitter page, what is that he's a book and vinyl collector, and he's also a big fan of the slow clap. And my voice is a little bit hoarse today because I've been just overdoing it at the social media event, so I'm going to make sure that we hear a lot from Seth today. So Seth, hello, say hello, and what do you have for us today?
Hey, good morning, Beth. You able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Great. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm coming to you from the basement of Torrey Pines North, one of the locations for National University and National University System in our new marketing space. And I'm really excited to carve out some time to talk to you all today about some topics that I'm very passionate about. So I'm looking forward to this.
Well, thanks. Well, I have some questions to begin with, and then if some of the other people on the webinar would like to join in, we want this to be highly interactive, and I want to make sure that everybody gets something back. And I want to see you as the hero because you really are doing quite the job at National right now. So let's go back to this Buzzed About campaign I mentioned for higher education. Can you tell us a little bit about how did that change what you know about marketing?
Sure. So that campaign was a campaign for an institution called Southern New Hampshire University, and the concept in its purest form was that we were primarily an online institution, and that we were going to drive around the country in a bus and personally deliver diplomas to online students who couldn't make it to graduation, to bring graduation to them. And that campaign taught me a lot about marketing. I'll tell you a few things. The first thing that it taught me was that before marketing can make a difference, it has to get out the door. It took 7 months to get that campaign approved. So for us in marketing, a lot of other folks are involved in our jobs. There's folks that manage the budget or folks that manage enrollment. There's usually an institutional president. So even if you're at a company as opposed to a university, you're going to have a CEO or the head of your department. You're going to have all sorts of stakeholders. And even when you have a great idea, getting that great idea out the door is something that marketers need to be thinking about. And so for myself, to be candid, I didn't, which is why it took 7 months. I thought that if you had a great idea, we would just all go do it and it'd be great. But what it took was budgeting and schedules and proposals and presentations and this whole art of the sell. I learned that the hard way, and that was a really good lesson. And the other thing for me, the two things it taught was the power of an integrated campaign. That was a campaign that ended up producing creative assets that were used on television, radio, print ads, everything from display and online and Facebook to social media. So we did one campaign that produced for multiple channels, and we hadn't really done that before at that institution to that magnitude. And then finally, what it taught me was the power of emotion. There's a lot of factors that go into some making a decision, and as marketers, we're not interested in manipulation, but we are interested in persuasion, which is that if it's in someone's best interest, can we encourage them to take an action? So in the most times when we're marketing something, it's either to take an action or it's at least to increase maybe your perception of a brand or how you feel about a brand. So there's always like an outcome we're after. And the reality that campaign taught me is the power of emotion specifically, that a lot of times we can market on facts, and that has a very important role. So why should you think that our organization is so great, or why should you support us doing something, or why should you buy a product that we're making? But more than that, before someone can kind of rationally think about your organization, you have to get in front of them, make them feel something, because otherwise you just don't matter, right? The world is too busy, it's too noisy. And so the first thing we have to do is break through the noise. So that campaign taught me the power of emotion in marketing, and that when you lead with emotion, a lot of times you can get someone's attention, and then you can have that rational conversation on a website or somewhere else. But first thing you have to do is kind of be relevant. And that campaign taught me a lot of things, but if nothing else, it definitely taught me that.
Wow, those were three really, really great pointers right at the start. Three things. It takes more than just a good idea. It takes a team, and also use it for all of your different elements. And I love how you tied that answer up with emotion, because I think that is so key. What you say from your heart, and not just happiness and sadness. I mean, there's a whole range of emotions you can go through. That was really well done. Now let's keep this ball rolling here. So you founded Higher Ed Live back in 2011. So I'd love to hear how you were inspired to do that, And also, again, what did you learn from that experience? Can you share a little bit about Higher Ed Live with us?
Absolutely. So in 2009, I read a book called Crush It by a gentleman named Gary Vaynerchuk, who's now the CEO of VaynerMedia. And when I read that book, he talked a lot about personal branding and the power of personal branding. So I immediately after reading that book started blogging, which I'd never done before. And I started vlogging. I bought a little flip camera and I filmed myself. And what I found was that I was gaining traction. All of a sudden, within my organization, I was just, another member of the marketing team, but in social media, I was connecting with folks and having conversations. And the idea came, well, if people are already watching these videos, would they watch something live? And I literally sent a tweet out and people responded and said, no, I'd watch a live show. And so I went home one night and figured out how to do it. And my phone rang, and I was really lucky that a company called Integral, that was a Facebook application. It's now a company called Uversity. They called and said, we want to help you do this. And so I came up with the idea of doing very similar to the conversation we're having now, live weekly webinars, specific about higher education. And the goal was that the traditional conference model is sort of gated. Most people don't have budget to go to a lot of conferences. And so what if we brought the conference content online? And then instead of charging the attendees, those of us working in the industry, we charge sponsors who wanted to be in front of those viewers. And so it launched, it was actually in 2010, and I built it up into a company. I had multiple shows. And then in 2012, I was just simply too busy myself. I was working at Southern New Hampshire at the time. And so I was really lucky that we got acquired by a fantastic company called M. Stoner out of Chicago that I've been a fan of for a long time, and they still run it today. So there's still live weekly web show content almost every day of the week. But that whole thing was me just trying to figure out how to use, at the time it was a platform called Ustream, using a laptop mic, a microphone and camera, and just sort of hacking this thing together and trying to figure out how to make this kind of online TV show thing work. So it was just an experiment, and it all grew. It started with, again, reading a book, writing a blog post, shooting a couple videos, and then trying out this live show thing. And it was never intended to be a big company or anything. It was just sort of like, I'll try this for a few episodes and see how it goes. And got a lot of traction and a lot of success from it. Actually, I think my entire career path changed because of that, actually. So to me, the thing that most impacted my career's trajectory wasn't even the work in my traditional day job. It was that side hustle of doing Higher Ed Live that really made a difference.
I remember Ustream. I did some back then in the day too. So are you still hosting any live streaming events today?
No, I'm not. So I haven't actively done that I haven't hosted in about 6 years. And I've been a guest on shows. I did a handful of podcasts last year and things. To be honest, I miss it. And I've been thinking about getting a little bit back into it, but it's always something that's been on the back burner, and I have not made it happen since. Well,
let's talk about what attracts you. Why are you so passionate about higher education?
Sure. So for myself, for higher education, it's definitely personal connection. My grandfather was a college president of Nazareth College in upstate New York. All of my grandparents were college professors. My parents, my mother taught at a junior college. She taught accounting to adult students, and I spent a lot of afternoons in the summer, sitting in the back room of class. And my grandmother built one of the country's first adult advising programs ever developed specifically at the Junior College of Albany. So that's a part of it, was that I came from this background. And the other part is just luck. Out of college, I worked for ABC News. And when I moved to Los Angeles, I didn't have a job. And so instead, essentially, I landed at UCLA out of luck in media relations, and fell in love with being at UCLA. And from there, it just felt like home. So I'm connected to higher ed today because and especially institutions like National University and National University System, because I really do believe, as my grandfather told me, education is the great equalizer, and that it's incredibly important that education is accessible and affordable. And so serving the adult and non-traditional student population in particular is something that I'm really passionate about, and it's something I'm proud to do. I always tell my team here, we don't sell vacuums. Not that there's anything wrong with selling vacuums, but a lot of marketers sell products they don't have a connection to. And we're really lucky here that we sell a product that we're really proud of. And I think it's something that I don't intend to change. So if I had to guess, I'd probably imagine I'll stay in this industry for a long time.
So you're passionate about the student because it's something that it's a great equalizer. I really like that. I like education because it's something that you invest in yourself, and no one can ever take that away from you. No economic downturn can ever hurt you. Your education will always be with you, and it's a real personal investment. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing in higher education marketing today?
Sure. So some of the most specific trends I'll say is let's first focus on demand. So demand for higher education is actually down. Our industry is down over 1% year over year. The year before that, we were down 1.5%. So there are less students in college every year for the past almost 5 years. And we won't have the same number of students in college that we did in 2009 until about 2025. And so there's a couple of reasons for that. A primary one is population dynamics, just the reality of the baby boomer generation when they had kids and when those folks are having kids, and the fact that they're still in K through 12 and they're not in college yet. But the first thing that you have to realize is there's less students going into college. And so what that actually means is that there's less demand, but supply is up. There are 4,000 colleges and universities in this country, and they're quickly expanding into the adult and online space. And folks are trying to really enter in the space wherever they can. And so what we're seeing is a couple shifts. The population shift is that if you're a traditional college, it's more competitive than ever. And if you're in the adult and online space, the competition is incredibly increasing. There's over 850 online MBAs as an example. And so increased competition and decreased demand has caused the fact that what's happening right now is that everybody's got to get smarter and work harder. And so the first thing is it's all about data and it's all about numbers. It's all about being efficient. In marketing, we typically are given a budget and then we have an outcome associated with that budget. And a lot of things we do are not direct attribution, right? It's not like we know exactly one activity drove an exact outcome. But the more we can know and the more we can increase visibility is probably the most important trend that's changing right now in higher education. So there's a shift to online, but across everything, there's really a focus on increasing visibility to performance. So that's a big thing in marketing. The other thing I'll mention is that the traditional channels are really going by the wayside. When I was originally in this space, it was direct mail and it was heavy television still and radio and billboard, and that has changed. And there's actually still a place for those efforts for a lot of folks. So it's not to say that there's not a home for direct mail. But the reality is, we're investing heavily in paid social media on Facebook. We'll be moving into Snapchat next month. We're on Instagram already, and not just on it from an organic perspective, but from a paid and from an advertising perspective. And so we need to go collectively where people's attention is, because that's really what we're after, is arbitraging that attention. And so that has been a shift, I think, into new digital channels and away from the initial digital channels that people focused on, like banner advertising, things like that still have a role, but the role is smaller. So I'd say those are probably a couple of the big things that are changing pretty dramatically and quickly in our space.
So the external factors like demographics are changing in a big shift, but the internet has connected us in so many ways. There's some opportunities globally, I would imagine, as well. So I'm glad you spoke about the traditional marketer, because that's the world I came from also. I came from radio. I worked as a disc jockey. I came from television. I worked in sales. I worked in big cities and small cities. I worked across different media. And so I see social media as really revolutionizing. The individual is now the network, because they're connected on a node. So I'm really glad to hear that you're so well connected with social media, and you mentioned that you're going into various channels. I see that people are still trying to connect with you right now, because it's live.
Doesn't stop.
People need you, Seth, and we're just glad you could give us this time today. So you've talked about Facebook, you talked about Snapchat. What do you get by your organic, and what do you get by your paid? What's the value exchange here?
Sure. So there's probably three tiers that I would look at that. So the first, in looking at organic, the first thing that we're trying to do is connect with and engage with our existing base. So as any organization or company has, you have customers or members. In our case, we have students and alumni. So the first thing that we want to do is connect with the folks that are already connected with us. So we want to create an opportunity online for folks to enhance their experience with our organization and with our brand. So it's connecting with our current community is first and foremost what the organic efforts are about. The second phase is that we want to actually get in front of the network of our network. We believe this is the most important area of opportunity for us, is not just going after the general public, but going after the friends and family and coworkers and network connections of our students and our alumni. And so there's a couple ways that we do that. One way is we try to create shareable content. When you share content on Facebook, you're sharing it with your network, a network that you're influential over. So if you share information about the university or about a success story, about something interesting, it's not just that it's being shared about us, you're the one sharing it. So there's a connected, you're sort of endorsing us with that share. So we can do that either by creating content that you want to share, or we can do that by spending money. So we also budget to boost our organic posts to get in front of not only our current network, but the network of our network. So we will boost our posts regularly to try to get in front of friends and family of our followers, to try to make sure that people get a feeling for who we are as an organization. And so we want to connect with our community. We want to connect with the network of our community. And then more broadly, we want to connect with potential prospective students. And so that's really through paid and advertising efforts. And so, we spend a significant amount of money on Facebook advertisements that drive people to web pages that tell them about, National University. They can learn more about our offerings. The hope in doing that is to get in front of people that may potentially benefit from an education from our organization. And we have found that Facebook is really powerful because it supplements when there is or isn't demand, meaning that we'll pay money on Google Ads, right? We'll bid on Google Ads. If you type in, I want to get a certain degree, maybe an online MBA, our ad might come up. But that's totally subjective to you searching for it. So if people aren't searching for that term, we can't serve an ad. Facebook, on the other hand, we can just get in front of people who may or may not be interested and sort of introduce ourselves. And usually when someone's browsing on Facebook, they're doing so because they have a few minutes. They're trying to just sort of entertain themselves, catch up with friends and family. And we found that like video ads in particular on Facebook are really powerful because they tell a story. And so almost half the budget that we spend on Facebook right now, we spend on Facebook video. And it's a great way to get someone who's on their phone, killing a few minutes of time, to take 2 seconds to watch an interesting story of a student. And so what we found is rather than selling ourselves, we try to tell the story of our students. Because when real everyday people can look at other people who are just totally crushing and getting their degree and juggling family and work and achieving really great things, it makes education feel possible. And that hope and optimism is really important. And so I say, again, those are the 3 buckets of Facebook, is we try to engage our community, connect with the network of our community, and then more broadly, get in front of people who would benefit from an education from us and who may be in a position to start going back to school.
Wow, that was really, really well said. I know that there's a big network because I know that a high percentage of our students at National University, where I teach, is connected. Family member or parent, grandparent, somebody has already told them this is where you need to go. And I know that that's a very powerful personal message, and that's the trust factor. So I would like you to talk about the trust, but I'd also like to, if you can, talk about the realities of the budget, because
Sure.
The way that the game of social media has been played is that organic has dropped down to 0.05% of your followers are now seeing you free.
Yeah. So there's 2 levels. The first thing, the point you made is so true, that the power of a recommendation or an influence from someone talking about a brand is so critical. We talked about that in our space as the referral rate. So what's the likelihood that a student would refer our organization to someone else? That is so critical. When there's 850 online MBAs, you're not going to price compare. There's just no way you can go online and learn about all of them. So what's happening in a saturated market that's highly competitive is that people are looking for recommendations from people they trust. And more often than not, that's friends, family, coworkers. And so if your neighbor, your coworker, somebody you run into at church tells you they had a great experience with a program at a certain university, you're going to go right to them first. Because you're going to say, well, so-and-so already went through the process. They already said it's great. It's not that different than cars, right? You see somebody who drives a car that you're interested in, you ask, how do you like it? Very much that's common in other industries, and it's coming to higher ed. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure that we don't only allow that to happen on its own. I mean, we don't choose to. People are talking about us, whether they like us or not, but that we foster opportunities. So we call that incentivizing social sharing. So how can we create opportunities where people want to share or talk about us? And one of those ways is that we have to get people to comment, like, and share our current social content. So that way it triggers in their feed so other people see it. In particular, we'll have campaigns where we'll ask people to share content. We'll ask them to tag someone they know. maybe someone who inspires them. And as we know, when you get tagged, it doesn't just hit your friend's feed, but a lot of times anyone who's the friends of both of you sees that populate in their feed. So we're trying to game that algorithm wherever possible. But the reality is, for all the efforts we're doing to game it, money is the name of the game. And it's just, we were at a place 5 years ago where most people weren't boosting posts, felt we didn't need to. It was just an added extra. Now, there are organizations with 5, 6, 7 times as many followers as us that get less engagement than we do, significantly less by volume, not just percentage, because they're not investing in putting their content out there. So we've accepted that. It's unfortunate, like anything, but the reality is it's money well spent if we can get students and alumni to connect with each other and with their networks and have a conversation about education. In our end, we're not afraid of digital marketing. We're leaning heavy into the future with a lot of those things. So we've definitely accepted that. We're boosting almost every post we put out.
So I know we have some people on this webinar here, and I'd love to hear some questions from them. And I have a question about chatbots. I noticed that when I go to the NU page, I do see a chatbot option. So the opportunity is there right now for everyone to create chatbots and to now use Messenger on Facebook, and so you don't even need Facebook to use it. You don't even need to go to that platform. You can start right with Messenger. Are you experimenting with chatbots at this time?
So we're currently looking at a couple of things. We are using a live chat solution. So on our website currently, there's a live chat option that takes you to a real human being who's local. There's a whole team of folks. We have a team of people at National University who specifically work on live chat. And so that is not AI, but actually human-based. So we have that as a chat feature. If you hit our website, we want to provide as many options as possible for how you want to communicate with us. And that's probably the biggest lesson, which is that never put a barrier between yourself and someone who you want to take an action. So you want to make it seamless. So if someone hits our website and they're interested, we want to provide them with as many options as possible. So right now they can call us on the phone, which they can do. They can click to chat, and there's a real human being that'll sit back and chat with them, and it's totally hassle-free. They can fill out a request for information form, which means we'll call them. If we can't get a hold of them, they then get emails from us that allow them to schedule time and say, when do you want us to call you? And then we're actually going to be implementing text messaging as well. So we can text people, people can click to text and engage with us on their phone. We haven't done chatbots as far as artificial intelligence, the kind of next level stuff that's coming out. That's really exciting. We'd like to. We manually staff like our Facebook Messenger for people that send in notes. So currently we're trying to provide as many options as possible for someone to communicate with us. And we're primarily resourcing those on a manual basis. That's not the future of that, but it was sort of the phase 1 first iteration of a lot of this technology is let's use it and then let's figure out how to scale it.
Great answer. I think we have a question here. Abdullah, did you want to direct a question?
Yeah. Hi, Mr. O'Dell. Thank you, Dr. Mary, to give us that opportunity. It's a great opportunity to talk to Mr. Seth. I have some question about the National University and the bus campaign too. So for the National University, you mentioned, so you guys doing a great job in the brand awareness and paid ads. Like as a customer, before I'm a student, as a customer, I saw a lot of advertisement for brand awareness. But in the engagement part, you guys doing good job. But the engagement and the organic content, it has to be more like interactive between the alumni and the student too. So if we create some groups as we did in the social media specialties, so you guys develop the student skills by those group with their professor and their other classmates, like a Facebook groups for each program, each major. So they have developed more skills to get it competitive in the job environment or the work environment, because the reason to study for many students is getting a job after the MBA. So that's the most reason for all students. So if we focus more on that content and create like more interactive between student and professor after graduation, because this word of mouth will be powerful for all of potential customer. If this university provide a good job after graduation, that will be a great word of mouth, and that will be like, this will go viral. And right now, you guys working hard on it. And I hear a lot of students before I enrolled in this program, they recommend National University. And the second thing is for international. I'm originally from Iraq, and I heard about National University in Middle East before I came here. So from the international students' perspective, if you guys focus on no GMAT required for the MBA and spread that message to global audience base, that will help getting a lot of students who want to study online, MBA online. The third part will be traditional. If we focus more on traditional, because obviously people who want to take an online class, they will not get reached by online. If we guys reach it traditionally, as the bus campaign you mentioned before, it will be perfect on work on the emotional marketing and meeting them in person, make a presentation for them. So we will attract them more to the online program. Because if I am just kind of traditional student studying in campus, I will not convince to study online if there is no one explain to me. I will not go online and search for it. And from the bus campaign part, what's the ROI from that bus campaign? It is an amazing idea, great idea. How many people sign up with it? The third question is about the webinar. What is the most influential or the best way to reach people or to market a webinar from your experience? Thank you. Sure. I know that's a lot of questions, but I can hold it.
No, that's okay. I think I got them, so I can go through those. First, thank you for the detailed questions. So your first point about organic content and social groups, you're absolutely right. I think that we have a huge opportunity to do a better job of engagement through audience segmentation. We obviously have the main National University social accounts and profiles, and those are an important thing for any organization to have. But I do agree that an area that we could expand in is having Facebook groups, as an example, specific to areas of study. So it could be as specific as a program, so an online MBA, or it could be as broad as business. Because something that I think we could do a stronger job of is creating opportunities for students and alumni to network together earlier in their time with National University. We have career services, but in a lot of ways they kind of come in towards the end. And to your point, if we had both, whether it's an online MBA group, but we also then separately had a business group for anyone in a business program. So students that are studying finance or accounting could be with MBA students. Fostering that kind of networking is critical. Because you're right, the career opportunities that people want is not only a major factor in why they go to school, but it's also something that could come from other students or alumni. It could be someone that you make a connection with, that they have an opportunity. So I totally agree with you on that. So I'll take that from my list because I think that's something I'll talk to my team about. I think that's a great idea, and I really like that. The second point on the international no GMAT, the simple thing I'll say is I totally agree with you. Now, academic decisions on like kind of requirements for a program is a little bit past me. A lot of times as a marketer, we don't control the product. Our job is to market the product, but we have an opportunity to have a conversation with the people that do manage the product. So in this case, the managers of the product and the requirements, someone who would decide whether or not we have a GMAT requirement for students would be on the academic side of the house under a dean. But absolutely, you're right that if we didn't have a GMAT requirement, the program would be more accessible. And obviously one of our missions is to be accessible. So those types of conversations are happening. But I totally agree with you. I think as marketers, we should always be fostering this conversation so that way product owners is what a lot of companies call it, if you work in the tech field. So product owners, in our case, an academic dean, realizes, if you weren't to have this requirement, here's how many more people could come and benefit from this program. So I totally agree with you on that. Your third point on traditional, I'm with you. And I think it has a huge role. And then let me spend a little time on your last two questions, because I think they're the areas that can provide most insight. You asked about the ROI of the bus tour. So there's a couple levels with that. the best way to measure the ROI of a campaign is to measure it on a channel by channel level, as well as then to compare it to the aggregate. The aggregate, I mean all in. So all in, during my time at Southern New Hampshire University, we grew from 7,000 students to 70,000 students in about 4 years. And the catalyst of that was the bus tour in 2013. Now, there's a lot of factors and things at play that cause that kind of dramatic growth. But the advertisers with the bus tour were very successful. You could measure that success in a few ways. You could measure it by how many student inquiries we were getting, which we were getting record numbers of leads off of that campaign. But you could also measure it for TV ads specifically, which the bus tour delivered. There are research organizations that measure the effectiveness of TV ads. And so we measured and did test with the research group some of our advertisements against other large-scale brands like Coca-Cola or other things. And one of those ads in particular, where students were getting their diplomas, was one of the highest performing ads the research organization had ever seen. And it wasn't because we were brilliant marketers, as much as I'd like to think that. It was because the ad had this really genuine moment where a father got a diploma and the son said congratulations. That's just really sincere. And so you can measure like a piece of creative, typically through focus groups, A/B testing, things like that. You can measure the effectiveness of a channel, which is how is Facebook doing right now, or how's Google Ads doing? And then you can look at the aggregate, how are we doing overall? So the bus tour campaign certainly increased brand affinity and awareness. How people knew about us, what they thought about us. To what extent, we don't fully know. But most importantly, the business grew. So at the end of the day, one of the best ways to measure success is if you just step back and say, are we trying to grow the business? How well did we do with that? So we certainly know it works, but there is no sort of, you never get it pinned down perfectly, if that makes sense. And then your last question on how do you get webinars out in front of more people? So if you have money, spend money and advertise it, but none of us ever have money to promote webinars like that, right? So I'll put that answer to the side. So the real answer is who you bring on the webinars. So what you want to do is you want to find people that have reach, so that already have a following in your space, and you want to invite them onto your webinar. The reason is because people tend to like to talk about the space they're passionate about. I mean, I'm on this webinar because remember Beth talking about it. I'm like, I'd love to come on and talk about marketing. I'm really into it. So you want to find people who are passionate, but you want people who have a following. So when I started Higher Ed Live, nobody was going to watch my webinar, weekly webinars, because no one knew who I was. So what I did was I made a list of the top 10 most influential people on Twitter in the higher education marketing space. Then I reached out to those 10 people and said, I'd love to have you as a guest on my show. Now, of course, these people like to have their ego stroked, and they were passionate about the topic, so they said sure. And then the week before, I would send them emails and say, would you mind promoting your episode? Here's some sample tweets and some links. And so they would then take the webinar and they'd share it with all the thousands of people that they're connected with, and they'd be promoting themselves. And then the next week, I'd do it with somebody else. And so each week, thousands of people were being told to come watch my webinars, not from me, because I didn't have any followers, but by my guests. And then over time, a portion of those people that came over every week would follow me, and they'd start watching every week. And so every time I'd pick up more and more followers that became my followers. So the key is you want to go after existing social media influencers. You want to bring them onto your webinar and share the spotlight. So you end up being like the host. So you are the host of a party, but you're not the only one coming. So you want to basically just create the opportunity to bring people together. But if you can be a conduit between a social media influencer and people who want to hear what they have to say, and your webinar is the bridge between that, then you don't need any money to get people to watch. But the key is to make that list, to go after people, and go after mid-sized names. None of us are going to be able to go out and get Gary Vaynerchuk to come on a webinar at this point, right? He and we followed each other on Twitter since 2008. It's hard enough to get him to respond to my DMs anymore. He does still sometimes, but it's tough. He's busy. So look for people that are achievable. And so if you have a defined space or a niche, it's easier. So rather than going after marketing, what's the topic you want to talk about? But either way, the key is that what you need is reach, and what you don't have is budget. So find people that have reach, which means they have followers, and then invite them onto your platform, and they'll promote it for you.
Oh, that's a brilliant idea. Thank you for that. It's great. Actually, that's what the approach Michael Schwiznar he's make too. I believe so. He make an interviews, and then right now here is social media marketing world. as you say here, as you saw here. So yeah, it's a great idea. I'm planning to do that actually in the Middle East. Get
Cool.
digital marketing experts and collect them. And I talked to Dr. Mary 2 days ago about that. Thank you for that advice. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Well, we had a lot of questions just in one little segment there, and I think he packed it in. Open to other questions if anybody wants to type them in or ask here. I have a few more questions that I'd like to ask you. Now, this specialization on social media is also about mobile marketing, because I saw that as a niche that nobody was getting into. Nobody in higher education had any kind of mobile marketing focus. So back in 2010, we started developing this program. And now here we are 8 years later, and it's still going. We've got students that are starting this month in that specialization. And so I want to ask you about how do you see the evolution of mobile marketing? Is it just a channel, Seth, or is it a revolution, or is it a device? And when you answer that question, think of Qualcomm, because Qualcomm is about to maybe have some rocky times ahead. So what do you think?
Sure. I think when mobile started, it was just something to consider. But mobile is absolutely now the majority. The majority of traffic coming to our website is from mobile devices. The majority of people that are requesting more information is coming from mobile devices. Mobile is marketing at this point, in my opinion. And so for folks, it not only needs to be considered first, but it needs to be considered the significant priority. So when I say considered first, websites obviously have to be both responsive and adaptive. Responsive means that the size changes for the phone, and then adaptive meaning that based on your device, the actual engagement can be different. If you're on an iPad, you can scroll and touch screen. If you're on a desktop, you can't. That's a small factor, but also understanding how people consume content is so critical on mobile, because the amount of time we spend on our devices is dramatically different. And so we are spending a lot more investment in Facebook advertising, as an example, because two reasons. One, Facebook advertising takes up the majority of your phone screen, right? When you see an ad, it's multiple screen, versus those thin little banner ads that are very tiny and across the bottom. But the other thing to think about is when you're on Facebook, you're intentionally looking for a distraction. So you're in the right mindset for a marketer to introduce themselves and say, hey, can I steal your attention for 30 seconds to show you something cool? Versus if you're reading an article on a website where you see a banner ad, you may be very specifically trying to conduct a task, in which case you don't want to be interrupted. So not just understanding the role of mobile, but really how folks are consuming that content is critical, because the reality is it's by their side at all times. So, text messaging is part of mobile marketing. That's something we're rolling out here at NU in the next couple of weeks. And really understanding the role of application versus web. I have a personal opinion that we used to have a lot of debate over whether or not you should be building applications for iPhone and for Android, or you should be just building really great HTML5 websites. In my opinion, the reality is twofold. One, we should be doing both is the first thing. It's not an either or anymore. It's about providing people options. So, for instance, something we don't do today that I'd love for us to do, when you inquire with National University, you should be able to download an application that walks you through the application process. You can take pictures of your transcripts. It has a built-in an ability to sign something and send it back. We should take that whole experience and put it on your phone, which we don't currently do today. So that's experiential. The other benefit of having that is we need to be what I call always on, which means that if we have that application on your phone, we can be running it in the background, which means not only can we understand aggregate data of when you do or don't come into campus, but most importantly, we can do push notifications. Proactively reminding people of things is really, really important. I don't know if you've ever tried like those, the meal tracker applications, right, where you track your food on a phone, but the reason they work is because they remind you when you forget to do it. And it's the same thing for any of us. People are coming to National University, but it could be to a company you work at someday, because they're interested in what you're doing. So they're saying, I'm interested. But the reality is there's a lot of things competing for their attention in their life. And so having the ability to push notify their phone and really just remind somebody, hey, guess what? We're still waiting on this one thing. Or if you follow up now, let's get you registered in your next class. Having that kind of relationship is just so different than putting all the burden on the student, or in your case, it might be a customer, right? We want to share that burden. We want to use technology to alleviate that burden. We need to make things as easy as possible for people. So to me, mobile is marketing at this point. There's still obviously a big role for desktop, But that role is diminishing. And it's really, to me, the role of the smartphone that's going to be the future of things.
And Qualcomm, any thoughts on that?
Being new to San Diego, I'm not actually close enough to that conversation piece. I'm actually not sure.
Well, we have 13,000 employees at Qualcomm who live in San Diego and around the world. Broadcom has made a hostile bid to take it over, and that could really change because 1.8 people are relying on those jobs of 13,000. So there's definitely a multiplier effect, and it will affect our economy if that goes up. And they've been a leader in this technology since the late 70s. So and UCSD, I think, has the most is front page news in the UT today. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah. So Rico has a question. Please go ahead with your question.
Thank you. And I can't get Zoom and my webcam to work, so we'll just say I'm in an undisclosed location. As a marketer myself, I always find it interesting to see how other industries, put together marketing campaigns. And I've really been following the current campaign where on social media, the National is doing using student stories and alumni stories. I became aware of it and the video and display ads that use stories because my son and I were in one of the video ads last year that were put together. So I've really been following the campaign even closer because I found the process interesting and fascinating. But my question is the process of finding, customer stories, student stories, alumni stories for the campaign. What, I'm trying to imagine what is that like? How did you actually bring that to fruition to find not only enough customer stories, but enough good, compelling, relatable, emotional stories for the campaign?
Rico, I'm so glad you asked that question because this is one of the few areas where I feel like I actually have expertise. So many times in my career, I think, I'm just trying to figure this out like everybody else. But getting and identifying successful customer stories is one of few areas that I think I've figured out. So I'm so glad you asked because I'd love to share this. It seems obvious once I say it, but I promise it wasn't obvious to me at first because it took me years to try to figure this out. So what we do is that you ask every single customer you've ever had ever if they want to do it. So in the case of National University, we sent an email to 89,000 people, which was our complete list of every student and every alumni that we had an email for. And we said, would you like to be in our next campaign? And then we just sent a link to a Google survey. We said, if you do, please fill this out. You typically will get 1 to 5% response rate for those things. And the more often you do it, the higher it'll get. So our first one here, we got about 1%. We had less than 1,000 people said, we want to be a part of this. And they filled out about a 10-question survey. And then with sincerity, we took 30 hours and we read through every single submission and we color-coded and ranked them based on a variety of factors, where they lived, the program they were in, how interesting the story was. Then we had phone calls with the top 150 people and did interviews with each of those 150 people. And then we whittled it down to a shorter and shorter list until we got to about 30 students and said, these 30 students are not only have unbelievable stories, truthfully, so many people did, but these 30, when combined together, really represent the whole. So we had students from all different programs, all different life backgrounds, geographies, so we made sure we had that mix. So it took, in total, we were able to do the entire thing in about 3 weeks. And we tried to do it around other work. It was led in this case by a copywriter that we have here. Previously, I did that work myself at Southern New Hampshire. What I used to do is from 4 a.m. to 11 p.m., I would do phone calls with students just from my cell phone. And I remember one Sunday morning, I got up at 3 a.m. to have a call with a student from Minnesota who worked the night shift at a rehab facility. And I talked to her on her lunch break at 3 a.m. So it's incredibly hard to find those stories if we think they're going to come to us on their own. So they're just like, we hear about it. And so my answer is cast the widest net possible and then filter that down. So quite literally, email everybody, ask the right questions that you think you need answered to find, what's special about that story. Why did you choose us? What do you tell people about us? Whatever other questions might come to mind for you. And for me, one of my favorite questions is I ask someone, what was the moment you realized this place was different? Usually by asking someone about a moment, they'll remember a specific thing. It's not like, oh, I love my faculty. It's like the one time that one faculty member, called me on a Saturday night because I was struggling. That was the moment I realized I love this place. So asking someone what was the moment, and then literally calling people and Skyping people and getting photos. It's exhausting, but it's an incredibly filling process. And we're now sitting on 100 stories that are fantastic, and we're featuring another 30 students in a photo shoot coming up. And so it takes a lot of legwork, but the best thing I would say is cast the widest net possible, and then build a series of kind of steps to filter it from your email everybody, read everybody's responses, talk to a subset of those folks on the phone, web Skype with a smaller subset of those folks. And then what we'd literally do is build bio sheets, a photo of the student, a brief bio, we pasted it on the wall. And so you could walk down a wall and see about 50 different student photos. And then we sort of like a puzzle would move it around. Like, okay, well, what do we got this? Well, okay, we already got 2 students from this program, so we can't have any more. And what about over here? And we basically put it like a puzzle so we could step back and look at a wall and say, like, these 30 students are our university.
Wow, that's great. Thank you for explaining that.
Great question, Rico. Thank you for that excellent explanation too. I'm going to go take a look at your wall. Seth, we just have a few more minutes. I want to ask a question, and I'm going to give you a minute to kind of wrap up and give your statement. But what advice do you have for aspiring marketers today?
Okay, let me think about that. That's a really good one. Okay, so I would say a couple things. My advice for aspiring marketers is a few things. I'm going to hit you with probably 2, 3, maybe 4 that aren't necessarily related. The first one is say yes. When you're newer in your career, and even truthfully when you're further along, it's critical to be open to opportunity. I, for instance, was at UCLA, and they asked me if I could shoot video, and I told them yes. And I couldn't really shoot video. And then, 2 days later, I was sitting down with General Wesley Clark doing an interview, and suddenly I was a video editor, and suddenly my career opened up in different directions. People asked if I knew social media, and I said, yeah, sure, I know social media. I built UCLA's first Facebook page. And then all of a sudden I was doing that. So saying yes and being that kind of individual is going to go really far. You don't need to know exactly where you're going. A lot of this is allowing for momentum and flow. So where the opportunity is, go. If people need help, fill in and plug those gaps. So say yes is a big piece. The other thing is it absolutely is all about networking. And so for me, doing my personal branding, the blog and the vlog, and then the webinar series, those opened up doors for me that got me my job at Southern New Hampshire University, allowed me to speak at conferences. All of that came because of my willingness to share and engage. Part of that, the lesson to me, is provide value. So I spent, 2 years, I spent every Sunday doing a live weekly web show for people that provided free professional development. That was a sacrifice on my part. Certainly it's paid dividends now, but at the time it was hard. But provide value for other people and trust that value will come back to you in meaningful ways. And then the other things I would say is think about yourself as a T-shaped marketer. T-shaped marketers is really going to be the future of marketing. And what a T-shaped marketer is, if you're not familiar, is it's someone who's broad in several different things and then deep in one. So deep in one, for me, to be candid, I came up through creative. So I am very deep in creative and branding in particular. But I'm broad in the fact that I know a lot about paid media. I know a lot about account management and other things that I oversee. And as you move up into management, you're always going to become more of a generalist because you're going to have specialists underneath you. And one of the things that can catch a marketer in their career is you become too specialized and you can get stuck. So if you only get known as doing organic social, you don't do paid social, you don't do traditional marketing, you don't creative, all I do is organic social. Well, the reality is within most organizations, you can only go so high, and then you become a social media manager, and that's the highest position of someone who does that. And so if you think of yourself as a T-shaped marketer, meaning, okay, I do organic social, and that's what I'm really good at, but even on the side, it doesn't have to be your own job. Maybe I work for a nonprofit or for my church, I do some paid ads, maybe I do some creative on the side, or I volunteer to help another department with something. You broaden that skill set so you can show, no, I know other areas, but I'm deep in one. That allows you to be more attractive from a management pathway perspective. And I think that's something to consider as well. And then lastly is if you really want to grow in your career, don't be afraid to move. I think one of the reasons I've been lucky enough to be in the position I am here is that I moved from LA to New Hampshire to Utah to here. If you think about where's the best career opportunity, if you say, what's the best career opportunity in the whole country versus only in this one city, Obviously, the reality is there's going to be more opportunity to consider if you look at cast a wider net. Now, that doesn't work for everybody and in everyone's life situation, so I certainly understand that. But if or when you're given the opportunity to consider things maybe outside of your comfort zone or even outside of where you live, realize that it increases the amount of opportunities. I was living in Utah. There was no vice chancellor of marketing job in Utah that was available. So if I really wanted this job, I was never going to get it there. Or I was going to wait a real long time until it came up at like University of Utah. But because it was open here and I was willing to move, I could get into this role faster. And so, those are a few things that I would share as some advice for folks. And then finally, the last thing I would just say is don't stop learning. Be really passionate about this stuff. I don't always do the best job of this, but I try my best to always be on all the social channels, to be a practitioner first, to be a user first, before I'm a marketer. Because how can I use a platform to market that I don't understand myself from the user's perspective? So just, when in doubt, keep your phone, download the latest apps, and try to stay active and experiment and stay curious. And I think that'll really work out.
And you also mentioned you're involved with AMA, and I think you're working on the event coming up on higher ed. Could you mention that too?
Absolutely. So yeah, the more my career's grown, the more opportunities I've had to give back. So that point of providing value. And so, I serve as an advisory board to one private company, and then separately I'm on an advisory board for the American Marketing Association. So I sit on their higher education conference committee, and I chair their digital track. And so that's a 3-year, unpaid position that I took on, where I helped put on a national, really what's considered the national conference for higher education marketers. And it's a chance for me to give back and serve a little bit. And so that is another example, I think, of pay it forward. It's been great for me from a networking perspective. I get to meet lots of different CMOs, college presidents, other marketers, but it also comes with the reality that I put in a decent amount of work to help make sure that conference really is a valuable event for people to attend. So as your career grows too, I think you're going to get invited to do different things. It could be big things like that. It could be smaller things like advising a friend's startup or a friend's company. But from my perspective, when in doubt, if you can shave off a little of that time and give back, it almost always comes back to benefit you.
How can we get in touch with you, Seth, if we have another question? What's a good way to reach out to you?
That's my question.
Sure. So, sure. So, I have a website that I've done a poor job of updating, which is sethodell.com. It has my contact information there. I am on Twitter at Seth O'Dell. And I'm more active there. Facebook and Instagram I have kind of locked down. That's more like friends and family. But Twitter I'm active on. And then to be candid, my email is seth.odell@gmail.com. And you can email me through my website, sethodell.com, or email me at Gmail. And follow me on Twitter and connect with me. Would be great.
I put those show notes in. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate you being here. Again, a real pleasure to learn about how higher education is going to change, and then what National University really is, how it's impacting the future of our students. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you all for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Seth, and it was a great time to meet you. Thanks.
Thank you.